Hello, women of drummer. Hello, hello. So tonight we have a special guest, um, Woman of Voss, who was 2018 Woman of Drummer, an amazing human. Um, and I'm going to let her tell a little bit about herself. First of all, your pronouns. Yes.
They, them, she, her are all
Okay.
ones that I use.
Okay. And we're going to let you tell a little bit about yourself before I dive into questions about your experiences.
Oh
So
boy. Okay. Let's see. I'm awful at these bio things. Like for as many as
yeah.
I've had to write over the years, I'm always feel like, all right. So, let's see here. As mentioned, I was Woman of Drummer 2018. I was the inaugural Woman of Drummer. So that's got a very, very special place in my heart. I've been doing this kinky stuff really since about 2010, so a solid 10 years. My favorite types of play are erotic boot block, blood play, pummeling, critter type stuff. I am a pup as well. So I just like it all, really. I mean, that's what it boils down to, is I just want some
Right.
of everything. My partner and I produce several events here in Florida, which is where I'm currently from. So yeah, sorry, my cat was delivered to me. He's ran out his welcome in the other part of the house. Um, so I'm not sure what else I should talk about, because I don't know what you're going to talk about. So that's just a little bit about me, and yeah, that's all I got.
Okay, good. Well, that's a good jumping off point. So you've been in the lifestyle, you say, about 10 years, and you're our first ever Woman of Drummer, and you play all kinds of crazy, which is kind of how you landed here, right?
Yep.
Lots of fun. One of the things I know that you're into is the piercing and stuff, all the sharp things too, in addition to all your other fun stuff. Tell me how you got into that.
I've always been into body modification. So that's something, from a non-kink perspective, that I've done for for the good part of my adult life. So I mean, body piercings and things like that, tattoos. And then I had a woman who actually wound up being my mentor in my local area. She was really into needles, and I, having grown up with some health issues, always had a really bad correlation with needles. So I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Your kink's not my kink, but that's totally, like, you rock it. That's awesome. And she was never pushy or anything, but she just did her thing. And, we always shared circles. And then finally one day I'm just like, I want to try like 2 of the teeny tiniest ones. I want to just see what it feels like. I do body, I get body piercings, so maybe it'll be okay. And then that pretty much was it. So she wound up being my mentor for a very long time until she moved away. But it really was that was sort of like all right, well, maybe since I'm okay with this and a body modification standpoint, maybe then, I'm kind of cool with this in a temporary sense. And since then, it's really kind of come together, and I've had the opportunity to study out in San Francisco, my body modification and my piercings, to help hone my skills, not only from a professional side, because at one point I carried a piercing license here in Florida, but also so that I could kind of up my game to be, my piercing game for my community back here. So for me, there's a, you know, not only is it fun, but it can also carry a lot of sacredness and spirituality with it. And so that is probably by far, especially here in Florida, the type of play I'm most known for.
Sweet. I love it. So, how did you get to the point where you took the things that you love like that? How did you segue that into being a leather woman? How did you find your way into this part of the scene?
So it actually is all very much wrapped up with Mama Vi. And there was a Leatherman's conference that came in to St. Pete, Florida, into the now no longer Flamingo Resort, which used to be our LGBT hotel resort, kind of sleazy hotel and pool that we used to have. Oh my God, it closed last year and I was so sad. Like, we were all really sad because that was a home for a lot of us. But it was the first time I had known who Mama Vi was. I'd heard of her and I heard of the library. But at this point, was just really kind of learning about leather and not even necessarily how, you know, where my place was. But and that's actually the very first place I met Tony. I don't even know if you remember that, Tony. I just remember you came up, you introduced yourself, and you're like, so there's a Leather Women's Roundtable going on later today. Love to have you there. And then you went off doing your networking thing. And we had been connected for a while on Facebook, and I unfortunately could not make it, but I just remember that meeting. So that was kind of like the very, very first time. But so there was that. And then I had the opportunity, because I really didn't know many people at this conference. So I was there helping because a friend of mine had asked for some help. And I remember, you know, in my downtime, you know, I reverted back to what I knew in high school when I didn't like have anyone to sit with in the lunchroom. I would go and sit in the library. So that's what I did here too. And I remember coming across, I spent hours over the course of this weekend with Mama Vi in the little makeshift library she had there, just poring over everything. And the biggest book that made the biggest impression on me was Fakir Musfar's Flesh and Spirit. It's this beautiful hardbound purple and gold print book. It's beautiful. And it was out of print. It's been out of print for a very long time. The publisher went out of print shortly after this book was done. And it was the first time I had the opportunity to see it in person. And I remember sitting in one of the chairs, literally going page by page by page. Because this is someone, for those of you, I think probably most of you know who Fakir was, but just for the sake of information, Fakir Musfar is kind of considered the grandfather of modern body piercing. He helped really bring it to the States, really like have safer procedures and dedicated tools, and took, you know, made dedicated jewelry and really helped bring that. And so he used to, until his passing, he would run these intensives to train people who are going into the body piercing industry, because there's not really outside of just a standard apprenticeship, there's not really any way to learn body piercings. So he, we have a guest visitor here. And so I had looked into this intensive a year or two prior, but at the time in my life, the financial cost was just too much. I was still pretty fresh out of a divorce, just rebuilding from that. So it was, from a financial standpoint, super unattainable. And, you know, there was still this idea of, it's kind of a luxury. What do I can just, take my time and learn these things through other methods. And I remember going through this book, sitting here with Mama Vi and chit-chatting with her over the course of the weekend, and being so moved. It's a really beautiful book. It's just all these beautiful pictures of Fakir, of his partner Cleo, and people over the years that he has photographed in different body modification types of positions and piercings, and some of his corseting and things like that. And it's just moving because the energy just radiates off of the page. And I remember thinking, maybe it's time for me to start looking into investing in this craft of mine that I love so dearly, and maybe I am worth it. So this was in 2015, and this was in, I think, February. And by late April, I had figured out how to come up with the funds and flew to San Francisco for this week-long intensive. So that's how powerful. So I say all of this because this is really the point that I started, if there was like an official point even, started really kind of go, okay, this leather thing is my thing, and I think there's a place in here for me, meeting Tony, meeting Mama Vi. Those were really the first time outside of, Facebook and online, I had met in person leather women, because, and even to this day, there's not a ton of them here in Florida, and certainly not in my area. There's more than there used to be, but there's still, comparatively to other areas, not a lot. So this is the first instance that I had where there was leather women doing their leather thing that I got to meet. And so between that and actually getting to look at this book and, giving me a reason to go, wow, this is really powerful. This is really moving in. I'm worth investing in, so I can then in turn invest in my community. Because at the time, other than me, my partner, and my mentor, there wasn't really anyone doing serious needle or blood play or that type of modification type play in in the state. So I feel like that was a little rambly, but I think I looped all the way back around.
Yeah, no, that's good. So once you recognized your village and got that experience, you'd met Tony, how did you make your way to Women of Drummer and then and then ultimately run? Like what spurred that? What inspired you to do that?
So it's funny because I've had a number of people in my life run for contests, and I've certainly aware of numerous contests and things like that. And it's, for being an Aries, I don't have a very competitive spirit. I'm usually pretty cooperative, so I'm like, contests aren't really my thing. That's cool, 110 support anyone who feels like that's their path. Go for it. I will do what I can to support you. And I just remember one day Tony announcing that the Women of Drummer was this new movement, and that she would be traveling around doing Women of Drummer roundtable discussions to throughout the US, and that there'd be different regions. And it was the first time that there was something a little like a leather woman thing that was a little bigger, that was actually within my reach. And so I poor Tony, I must have blown up her messages about every other day, going, so this Southeast gathering that you're talking about, where's it going to be? When is it going to be? can you tell me more about it? What details do you have? She's like, I promise I will tell you as soon as I have it. And she announced it for Atlanta, which for me is about an 8-hour drive. It's until you get to Atlanta, it's not a bad drive. And so I remember going, this is so cool. This is so exciting. You know, this idea of women players. Because there was not a ton of specific representation for women who were really like, we're here to play hard, fuck hard, have fun. Like, there was always like some other component, and not that there's anything wrong by any means with that, but it just didn't, you know, excite me in the same way. And so I, you know, was so excited when, you know, she had been talking about kind of the idea of behind the movement and things like that. So I'm like, okay. So once she announced the Southeast Gathering, I'm like, I remember putting up this post. I said, I'm going whether I got someone to go with or not. You know, an 8-hour drive is no big deal. I travel solo regularly anyway. So you can join me or not. I'm going if anyone wants to come along. And 2 very good friends of mine joined me. And so we drove up there, and we missed the bar night because I was stuck working. I could only take a half day. But then we made it for all of Saturday and Sunday. I don't even think we could make it because we had to drive back. I just remember definitely making it for Sunday, or for Saturday, I mean. And it was so cool because I think there was about 25 leather women in attendance for the round table. And it was so amazing because this is literally the most leather women I've ever seen in one place. And it was just like, wow, like, you know, and some of them were just there to kind of see what it was about. Some of it were like, yes, all in. But it was cool because it brought us all together in this one spot. And Tony shared about the movement and the contest and the fact that it wasn't really about, like, you know, that there was a purpose, that, you know, this was someone who would go and facilitate what she was doing here, and that, you know, kind of bring this same concept to other leather women all over. And that resonated with me, because I already knew how much it meant to me, and this is really like just in the early stages. And I'm like, if this means that much to me, there's got to be more leather women out there that it will also mean equally as much, if not more. And I want to foster that. I want to be a part of that. I want to help facilitate that. And so before the weekend was over, Tony had talked to me and the friends of mine that went with me about, you know, hey, thinking about having the next year's Southeast Gathering in Florida, you know, we'd love to have your help. So I'm like, yes, definitely, you know, I'll help in whatever way I can, this, that, the other. And so I went back home, and, you know, kind of like one of those, is it really just kind of caught up in the moment, or is this really an idea that I need to chew on? And it kept coming back to the idea of, what if this is the first contest that really resonates? Like, because it's not going away like other ones. I'm like, oh, that's cool, move on. Oh, that's really awesome, congrats, move on. Like, but this one stayed in my head because of what it was about and what it was working to accomplish. And I kept thinking. I remember my friend AJ, he was one of the ones that went with me, who had been a previous title holder here in Florida before. I do too. And I remember spending some time with him and going, so this idea might be a little crazy, but I'm actually thinking about maybe possibly running for Women of Drummer. Like, I don't know, maybe. And he was like, yes, that's so awesome. If you decide, let me know. I will be your handler. Like, and so I kept thinking about it, and, you know, talked to my family about it, because it's a commitment for sure. Any title is, but this one being so travel extensive, I knew it was going to take me out of the house quite a bit. And then it lined up that I got a promotion at work that put me on salary. And so these pieces are starting to line up, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
the universe is maybe like kind of pointing me in this direction.
Nudging you. Yeah.
And so I started really seriously preparing for my application in December, put it in January, competed in February. Yeah.
In Vegas.
Yep, in Vegas. That was my first time in Vegas too. Like, Vegas is going to have to really work hard to top that visit. So just saying. So that was kind of the progression of it. And it all lined up, you know? And it really boiled down to the fact that the spirit and the drive behind the Women of Drummer movement really impacted me. And the idea that, you know, we're going to all of these different areas and giving leather women the opportunity to come together with other leather women. And because, you know, for me, that was so impactful, because it was something I didn't have. And so it just really was something very special, and something that was hugely important to me. And I definitely, in any way possible, wanted to be a part of it. And it just worked out.
Yeah.
The rest was history.
So one of the moments earlier when you were talking about, you know, really wanting to be part of those gatherings like that, when I think there was a photograph, and I can't remember which regional it was done in, and there was a picture of everyone meeting for the brunch on Sunday, and it's just a bunch of leather women sitting around like on someone's back patio. And I remember looking at that picture and going, oh, I wish I was there. I wish I was there. I want to hear all the things. I want to, like, I want to just, even if I'm just sitting in a corner and don't ask a single question, I want to take all that in. And then, so when a regional popped up in my area, and I was kind of the same mindset, like, I'm going, y'all can go with me, or I will just take my happy ass over to Tulsa all by myself.
Yep.
And just figure it out. And so I did. And it, you know, when you feel that pull for something, and you're just like, I just feel this is where I have to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, and then the rest is history with us.
I think the one you're referring to is actually in Columbus, because that one, it was a really cool kind of local neighborhood bar grill type place in the neighborhood that we held the majority of our gathering in. And because it was all kind of like brick it almost looked like someone's back patio, but that was actually the first gathering I did.
Cool. Oh yeah, cool. Oh, let's see. I think Nix has a question.
I saw half of the question.
I'd be more than happy to read it to you.
Yeah, please.
It says, I imagine you had people who supported you pre and during the contest. Who were those folks? Anyone other than your handler, AJ? And how important was that in getting you to where you eventually ended up? So who else was in your posse, your camp, your support network?
So the other person who was like big time supporter outside of my family was Shiloh Vicks, which I know most, if not all of you, at least know her through online, if not in person. She and I are extraordinarily close. She used to live in Florida. I've known her for a very long time. She now lives in San Diego, and she was another one who, when she heard that I was going to be running, she's like, okay, cool. That's not a long drive. I can bring all of the like household goods and stuff. So she made sure that when she drove in, she literally brought a grocery store and kept me caffeinated and fed the whole weekend. But she was equally as excited. So she was kind of like the second handler of sorts. And then my family was extremely supportive because between all the preparation and things leading up to that, and then of course everything afterwards, because they had to pick up a lot of slack. You know, our household, we all contribute to it, and so by not being there, you know, and being absent either for the preparation and then afterwards, you know, it was kind of like this conversation of, hey, if I do this, this is what it means for you guys too. So they were very supportive in that aspect. My home community was definitely supportive, but I think it was a little different for them because we don't have really a ton of leather contests, especially ones that were available for women. So they're like, you're doing this thing and we're super excited for you. How can we help? But not really understanding kind of the nuts and bolts, if you were, about it. So they were supportive to the best of their ability, and excited for me. So they helped with what they could and cheering me on, and then welcoming me home, and, you know, helping with, you know, all the, you know, the bits and pieces, and letting me have space to talk and share with them and stuff like that. So, yeah, it was all, everyone had kind of like a little different piece of the puzzle, if you will.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, take the village sometimes.
I did a question privately and she answered it privately. I need to read it to you because you won't see it. Fidget asked, she says, what I hear throughout your story is that you allowed yourself to follow your spirit, from Fakir to Mama Vi, the round table in Atlanta. What advice would you give others who want to run for Women of Drummer?
Don't doubt yourself. Don't let yourself get caught up in your head too much. Make smart choices, you know, don't just, you know, go crazy, but, you know, it's, nothing is certain out there. And, you know, at the risk of sounding super cliche, you know, tomorrow's not promised. So let's make the best fucking thing we can out of today. So if I had let myself, because it was scary, you know, I didn't,
Oh yeah.
you know, it was scary, this idea of, like, let's go all the way back to the fact that it was scary for me to volunteer at this Leatherman's event where I literally knew one person. And that was my friend who was the volunteer coordinator. And because he and I did a lot of stuff to help bridge the gap between the gay Leatherman community, and at the time I was more involved in the pan kink side of things. So we collaborated a lot to help kind of bridge that gap. So here I am, you know, just starting to kind of entertain and explore my little baby leather concepts, right? And so I don't know anybody in it. It was scary. It was scary not knowing anyone other than my one friend. But I pushed myself to get out of my comfort zone. And that resulted in, meeting people who literally changed my course or gave me the inspiration to, follow things that were kind of growing in my heart. And then, same thing, my first true solo trip was to the workshop of fakirs. So, I did that. And then, this idea of running for this contest, like if I had let myself, for me at least, it would have been really easy to get stuck in my head and to potentially talk myself out of it, but instead I kind of sucked it up, talked to the people who I needed to, said, hey, instead of saying, hey, talk me out of this, hey, can you support me in this? And I just went for it. The idea for me, and this is something that, especially early on in my title, I talked about fairly frequently, is the fact that a lot of people don't realize the level of social anxiety I have. And it was something I wanted to push myself and stretch my boundaries, because I know I'm capable of it, but it's real easy to be comfortable in saying, oh, this isn't something I do, this isn't something. So I put myself out there, and I can't even begin to quantify the wonderful things that have come back just by allowing myself to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I mean, all the yummy, sexy people and play that I've got to meet, all the wonderful stories and experiences I've been witness to. I mean, and it's because I chose to get uncomfortable. So
I think
don't
Tony has a question for us.
Yeah, I have a follow-up. When I think about the both of you, Honey and Voss, we've only had 2 contests, 2 title holders, and you both have 2 things in common. One is that you both shaved part of your head before the contest. Now, I don't know if that had anything to do with winning or not, but there's that. But the second thing I think is really important, and I'd like you guys, Voss, to elaborate, and Honey, if you want to elaborate. Neither one of you were a title holder before, and you both ran against people who were title holders, and the scores were close, okay? However, what you both have in common that I think was the thing that pushed you over the top is you both attended a regional before competing, and you really knew what Woman of Drummer was because you participated, where the people that you guys competed against were never at a Woman of Drummer event. Can you talk a little bit about being at a regional first before going to a contest?
Absolutely. I think that the regionals are so important because it does bring the opportunity for other women to come together in play and community in an attainable way. And so if it's not in the books for you to travel to a big conference of any sort, most people can, carpool and, come up with a little bit of gas money and a, $20, $25 ticket. And so being able to make that accessible and getting to witness what I feel is like the really core spirit of Women of Drummer.
Yeah.
It really, that's not, we can talk about it and try to explain it until we're blue in the face, but I feel like that's something that just can't be replicated. And it's something you have to experience. And even, talking, about, the parts of the weekend that are, open to the community as a whole have a very unique energy about it. It's different than any other bar night or brunch that I've come together in, because the spirit of Women of Drummer is still within that. And the people who attend that, even if they're not female identified are still understanding that spirit.
Yeah.
And they're still supportive of that spirit. So throughout this whole weekend, from the bar night on Friday till brunch on Sunday, there is this thread that's carried through, and you just can't explain it. You can't, I mean, we can talk about it, but there is something to be said about sharing in that weekend that really just sums up what we're all about. And that's why I feel it is so valuable.
I agree. I think that for me, it's the difference between going to a huge national protest and being in a grassroots organization and protesting locally. It has that same sort of feeling where you're like, okay, here in the regionals, this is where you see a sort of the boots on the ground type experience of creating and maintaining, holding space for leather women, and seeing that and feeling that, being a part of it, playing in it, participating in the round table. It had a way of helping you understand what the greater movement was about, because you're really connecting with people on a local level that are part of this nationwide, international thing. So you're not just meeting up with hundreds and hundreds of people at a big contest. You've already had your experience with, this maybe 15, 20 odd leather women in, Minnesota or Tulsa, or, you've had these connections with these smaller groups of women that you can identify with. And so it helps you see the bigger picture of who you're representing. It's really the who you're representing. So when you go into the contest, you really don't even feel like it's all about you. You're just like, okay, so I just, am presenting my best self so that you will be comfortable with me representing you and helping facilitate maintaining these spaces throughout the rest of the year. So maybe that's what helps make a difference when you go to a gathering first. Yeah, you really do get that heart.
And if some of you are interested in running for Women of Drummer and you're like, wow, we just went virtual, oh my God, I will tell you there is 3 committees working their ass off right now with Honey, right? With Honey to make, and Voss is in the Southeast one, to make our virtual weekends have the spirit of Women of Drummer. They're working hard because we don't want to forget 3 regions of the country. So just know that you haven't missed. Okay. Let me read the next question to you, Voss. Can you talk a little bit about the time and finances you had to put into the title and the traveling that you had to do? And there's a follow-up question after that.
All right. So my title year was a year and a half. It was, we didn't make any more regionals. I really wanted to, since we were the new kid on the block, I wanted to really get out there. One of the things that I feel gave me an advantage in my title year is that I was already a really avid traveler. Travel feeds my soul on so many different levels. So I was already very comfortable with navigating a travel budget and how to find places to stay that, and, just all sorts of different little tricks and things. So I used my budget, my travel fund for airline tickets. And I don't even know, I don't think I've ever tallied it up to see exactly how many places I traveled to in my title year. Now, I will say that I am privileged in the sense that I have a very good job that all of my extra funds, all my extra pennies went into my supplementing my travel fund. So I'm fully acknowledging that was a huge help. And then, just figuring out, Airbnb isn't always the cheapest place. The cheapest place isn't always the best place, just kind of using some of my travel savvy to make my budget go as far as possible. It just was just a little bit of research. But I went to a number of big conferences. I traveled to my home country of Malta to participate in Pride, which was really important to me to do so, because the LGBTQ movement in my home country of Malta is still, in the grand scheme of things, comparatively what we're used to here in the States, is still pretty new. This was I want to say they told me it was only their third or fourth Pride parade ever. And I remember growing up going back there, and it's a pretty Roman Catholic country, so there was a lot of stigma and stuff. So that was a huge priority for me, which, I just had to prioritize, what did I want to do? I know I have these 6 regionals that I definitely have to get to. I have the contest weekend. And then working out what else was important to me, what else was their value in being present for as Woman of Drummer, to kind of, network and to, strengthen and build relationships to, because that was really helpful as I continued to travel and meet people, and they learned what we were about, then they were more excited to kind of help us and go, oh, by the way, we'd love to have you here, or maybe when you're in town you can come and be a part of this or that. And I really felt strongly about kind of sticking my nose wherever I could to anyone who would listen, and even if they weren't really, I'd probably told them all about it anyway. So
you do have 2 follow-up questions.
Sure.
One is, if you could do one thing that would be different or better during your title year, what would that be?
Honestly, I probably would have eaten a little better on the road. It gets real easy to eat junk food. So I mean, I know that sounds kind of like a cop out, but
I'm not going to tell on your ice cream thing, though.
Ice cream was a big theme throughout my title travels. It may or may not be my favorite dessert, and I may or may not have tried ice cream in almost every place I went.
Wow, see, I missed that part, Voss. When you were with me, you were eating like oats and things delivered that were healthy. I'm like, how do you do that?
I believe, Tony, you're the one who requested carrots and hummus. I just ate them because it was there. I mean,
I thought you were, like a healthy eater. Now, if we had to do it all over again, being on the road with you, we could have done just.
Could have had ice cream for dinner every night, Tony.
Tony, she talked me into becoming Woman of Drummer over ice cream.
Oh, good.
That is actually the truth.
I have another question for you. It is it a requirement to travel outside the country for this international title?
It is. I don't know if it's is it a requirement, Tony? I don't think so.
No.
It would only be a requirement kind of if one of your regionals is in Canada.
Yeah, and that is true.
Yeah,
The requirements are that you have to go to the regionals, and one of them usually is in Canada. But both of you, and I don't know if, honey, if you want to address this too, both of you chose to go outside of North America. Voss, you went to Malta, and honey, you went to Australia.
Yeah.
Both of you blew me away with that, and I was thrilled. The question I always have is, are you going to have enough money to hit all the regionals? It's okay to go to Malta, it's okay to go to Australia, but you know, the deal is we have this travel fund and we have to do the regionals. So if you can do both, great, for whether it's your private funds or if the Woman of Drummer travel fund is large enough. Voss, like what, you talked a little bit about why you wanted to go to Malta, but it wasn't required, right?
Right. I feel like for me, it was important to me personally. And then it goes back to what I had mentioned before about budgeting, you know, my travel funds with my personal, you know, money that I was setting aside specifically for this and stuff like that. So because early on, this was something I knew I wanted to do, I already started working it into my finances for this. Because it was a big deal, because representation is hugely important for me, and I wanted to represent a queer leather woman in a country where 10 years before, I had my cousin, my 17-year-old cousin, confide in me the fact that, she might be kind of interested in one of her female classmates who is a lesbian, but didn't really want to talk about it because this country is so small that once you start down that path, everybody knows, and she wasn't ready for that. And she didn't want the stigma or the, everything that came with it, back then. So, so the idea that, I was so proud to be a woman of drummer and so proud of what we're doing for leather women, that to me, there was never a question that those two would kind of marry. So, but I think it really boils down to a personal decision, of what you're comfortable with, what you want to achieve, if that lines up with your goals, because it may not. Your funds may be better used elsewhere, So I think it's really a very personal decision that each individual would have to make.
I would say that for me, the drive to go to Australia is that my my friend Girl Ann, she was IMSL 2018, I believe. I think. I hope I'm not wrong on it. Anyway, she went home for a visit and really really worked hard on her vision of getting into men's spaces. And she talked to me a lot about how hard that is. And it impressed on me because I knew she was taking an upcoming trip. And I thought, wow, if ever Women of Drummer could be visible and really sort of make a statement, it would be going to Australia and communing with leather men in their spaces and showing them that yes, women can play hard, women can have that whole big hardcore sex, fuck shit up kind of vibe about them too. And it was surprisingly well received. And so, going into a Leatherman's night and having them go, oh, tell me about this. What is this about? And, and just making all of these friends, which hot as hell, everyone dressed like freaking Tom of Finland posters and just, and yet having them recognize and have respect for what I was achieving. And then marching in Mardi Gras and wearing my patch and just being big and bold and audacious. And I loved it. I loved that I had grandmothers, you know, posing with me, and people handing me their kids to to pose with, and it was like, okay, yeah, I think we're truly visible at this point. Yeah, we're not going to just, you know, slink away to our own little private spaces. We're going to go ahead and be seen wherever we are. And that was my decision for going to Australia, and no regrets.
And I must say, Fidget and I are very, very lucky producers. We have two title holders, and both individuals were responsible with the funds, spent them in the best of ways, made time and energy for different folks to have conversations. Why don't I follow up with the hard question, Voss? What kind of difficult conversations did you have? Because it takes a lot of courage to be a title holder and be out there. And how has it changed you in who you are as a leather woman?
There was definitely, especially the first part of my title year, the stigma with the Drummer North America organization and the correlation people wanted to make with us and them. And it was tough because sometimes people didn't even want to have those conversations. They wanted to make their judgments about me, about us. And that was difficult. And there were times, you know, that I would have to kind of put a check in and be like, hey, you know, hold your tongue till you know what you're talking about, and let's have this conversation. I thought I had a pretty tough skin when I started, and let me tell you, it toughened up even more really damn fast, because those were conversations I was fielding on the regular. I don't regret them one bit, because I was able to take those opportunities and educate people about us and about what we were doing and who we are. And to the best of my knowledge, at least, you know, people left going, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, I'm really glad you shared that information with me. I didn't know this, that, the other. And I feel much more positive about you, about your organization you're representing and what you're about, now that I know more information. I mean, not that it, you know, Tony, you did a great job, especially during those early months, about, you know, putting what, you know, our mission statement out and who and what we were. But it was a little tough, a lot tough, to be honest. And that was probably the toughest thing that I had to deal with throughout my year as title holder, because it was a lot of people, and there's still people who don't want to have these conversations, would rather carry their ignorance, and I'm at peace that that's on them, not me, not us, because I am insanely proud of what we do. And if you don't want to take the time to learn a little bit more and to be open to those conversations, then that's your loss. But I feel like that was a large reason on why I really hit the ground running and, you know, did so much, is that I wanted to share what we were about, because I was so proud and so excited, and I was open to those tough conversations. And, you know, I was really grateful, because there were, as I would go, there would be people who, before I could even say anything, would be like, hey, wait a second, that is not correct at all. This is not what they're about. You get over here and we need to have this conversation, before I could even open up my mouth. And that made me feel really good, because people were hearing what we had to say and taking it to heart. And that meant the world to me. So,
You know, something that meant the world to me, and is that in the program, the year that you ran our very first contest in Vegas, you had a letter written to you, and we didn't know it was going to be you, to whoever the first was, from 3 firsts, wishing the contestants the best of luck. And that was Sarah Humble, the first American Leather Woman, Andy Romano, the first Ms. World Leather, and Judy Tallwing, the very first IMSL, wishing the first woman of drummer the best. And that was quite significant, even though we were in the middle of a controversy that wasn't ours. Those 3 women stood up and wrote a letter and put it in our program and wished you the best luck. You are the first, you will always be the first, and you made herstory, just like the 3 of them. And it is never easy for the first person. I don't know if Honey's had exactly a honeymoon, Honey, but it is getting better. It is different, and there's other controversies that come up, you know, always in the leather community, right?
and I think that actually that's something I didn't include with what I just said, but you know, and maybe it's because I knew that I would have, you know, a successor at the end of my title year. And I kind of like a parent, you always want better for the one who comes after you. And so for me, it was important to get out there and shoulder what I could and correct those assumptions, in the hopes that whomever came after me would have less of that friction to deal with. You know, like you said, you know, it's never perfect. It's never ever going to be, you know, smooth sailing from every aspect. But if there was the possibility of me going in somewhere and kind of going, hey, this is what we're about, let's have these conversations, then whomever came after me could come in there and they would be welcomed and embraced easier, or, you know,
Yeah.
there would already be that groundwork put down. And that was my hope of going in and having these hard conversations, and, you know, going into these places and saying, hey, we're here. If you've got a problem with it, let's have this conversation.
So
Yeah, and it doesn't hurt to have tough skin going in. I mean, for sure. You know, I always try to go in with the best light imaginable of, okay, these are going to be wonderful people. I'm going to learn so much from them. We're going to connect. I'm going to make some lifelong friends, and then, you know, get hit upside the face with some nonsense. And it's fine.
And sometimes that's what it felt like too. Like, where did that even come from?
Yeah. So I felt like it was kind of the same. It was like, oh, you know what? I've had difficult conversations before. It's fine. The kind of work I do and raising kids who went to nationals for debate, we've had some tough conversations where, you know, this is how it's going to be, and this is who we are, and, you know, we make no apologies about it. So, and that helps, you know, start diplomatically and then wind your way down to the, you know, thing. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, especially Voss. We still haven't determined what our name is for each other. I don't know. Sister, mom, I don't know what it is. So thank you so much for sitting down with us tonight. And the fire actually kept going all night. I'm surprised. And and I really love hearing your story, and I'm sure we could sit for hours and keep talking. And definitely 2 things. I have to have some ice cream with you again.
Yes.
So as we're talking someone new into running. And and then also I asked you, and I feel like it can still be done. I asked you, if I win, would you pierce my nipples? And so I think that that's still a thing. Like, I think we can still make that happen.
Oh,
So,
I mean, we can make that happen.
Yay. All right. Wonderful. Well, good night, everyone. Be safe this weekend.